Live. How's it going, Mets fans? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with our latest breaking news live show here as the New York Metropolitans have acquired right-hand starting pitcher from the Brewers, that being an Adrian Houser, and yes, corner outfielder slash bench option, fourth outfield option, really, I should say here, and Tyrone Taylor. And in return, we're giving up a prospect that we actually acquired, if I'm not mistaken, in the Eduardo Escobar trade last year. And pitching prospect Coleman Crowe is heading to the Brewers after he will be out for the entirety of the 2024 season with, yes, Tommy John surgery. So the Mets basically were on the upper hand of a dump here from the Brewers. Very Braves-esque in this type of move the Mets will do. I'm curious if they're going to keep both these players, if they may flip one of them. Either way, the Mets just killed two birds with not even one stone because they just parted ways with a low-level prospect who won't be pitching at all in the 2024 season. So outside of the pessimistic fans out there, anyone that's rational understands that this is just an easy win and an easy pickup for the Mets to get a back-end starter and a fourth outfield type bat there for, yes, Tyrone Taylor. But I want to know your initial reactions, thoughts, comments, questions, and concerns. Again, I appreciate everyone first chiming in. Also, apologies if I'm a little nasally. Your boy is dealing with a little cold at the moment. I did not think that I would be doing this today. I was planning to go live later today. However, we have found out this breaking news. So let's get into it. Let's get into these moves, what I like about them, and all that stuff. So again, appreciate everyone first chiming in. If you're watching live and on replay, really does mean a lot. And especially when looking at Houser, the fact that the Mets got this guy for absolutely nothing is a huge win. We need as much pitching depth as humanly possible. And granted, Houser's a rental, but who cares? You know, if we're going to acquire depth pieces, I much rather be with David Stearns acquiring players that he has a great understanding of, and that is both the case with both Taylor and Houser alike during his long time as Pobo and GM with the Milwaukee Brewers. So I want to see your initial reactions as you guys are first coming in. Come as you are. Again, hope I'm feeling right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. This is just such an easy win of a trade for the New York Mets. You literally just landed your 5 or 6 starter in Adrian Houser and a fourth outfield bat with multiple years of control still in return for a low-level prospect, only because of the fact that that happened because the Brewers were doing a salary dump. And I love the fact that they were willing to do a salary dump here with David Stearns. So clearly that relationship, that bridge hasn't been completely burned, as trades are already on the horizon for both these clubs with each other. But I'm really curious how you guys feel about this whatsoever, because for me, we look at Houser's numbers. Apologies, usually have the numbers thrown up here for you guys, but I had to get this set up as fast as humanly possible because everyone was cut off by this trade. But for those that don't know Adrian Houser, 30-year-old right-hand starting pitcher, and 111 innings this past season, had himself a 4.12 ERA, a 4.16 expected ERA, just under a 4 FIP, a 7.76 K per 9, a 2.75 walks per 9, allows right around a home run per 9 innings, and this is someone that can come in, again, as your back end of the rotation starter, a swing man. You can get very creative with someone like Adrian Houser. And it's funny how 2 off seasons later, the Mets land the guy, because I remember doing potential trade videos 2 off seasons ago, and I had Houser in the mix of potential pitchers I would like to see the Mets land. Houser, of course, has had some very solid years in the bigs. If you look at his first year in 2019, where he pitched 111 innings, 3.72 ERA, 3.43 expected ERA. 2020, 56 innings pitched because shortened season, 5.3 ERA, but a 4.77 expected ERA. 2021, 142 innings pitch, a 3.22 ERA, 4.12 expected ERA, which tells you that while the ERA was great, he dealt with some luck on his side. Then as we fast forward to 2022, he had his second to worst career season, if not his worst, 4.73 ERA, a 4.94 expected ERA in just over 100 innings, and then rebounded a little bit nicely here in the 2023 season with a just over 4 ERA and over 100 innings pitched. So if you're looking for the Mets here to add depth, not only to the pitching staff, but also to their outfield, they just killed 2 birds with, like I said, not even 1 stone. So Houser's an interesting pickup here that I'm going to expand on plenty more here in a second. But for the first people just chiming in, thank you all so much. Greatly appreciate. Smash that like and subscribe button for your boy. Shout out BetUS for being a great sponsor on the channel, but we'll get into them a little bit later here in the live show as we're breaking down the news together that, yes, the Mets have acquired starting pitcher Adrian Houser and outfielder slash fourth outfield bench bat type and Tyrone Taylor for a low-level prospect, and that being Coleman Crowe, who will be heading to Milwaukee Brewers, who will not be pitching at all throughout the 2024 minor league season due to Tommy John surgery. But for those that don't know Tyrone Taylor, we got himself pull up the numbers right here. Outfielder, 6'1", 218 pounds for a 29-year-old California native. And in his past season with the Brewers, in 231 at-bats and 81 games, had himself a 234 average, a 713 OPS, and we're looking at an OPS plus of 91. So I'm actually surprised at his numbers here when I'm looking at the advanced numbers for Taylor. Up until the 2023 season, and granted it was smaller sample size, the previous couple years, he's been an above-average bat in baseball. In 2022, in 120 innings, had himself 17 home runs, 51 RBIs, a 233 average, a 729 OPS. Again, nothing flashy, but for a fourth outfielder, why would you be complaining too much here? A 102 OPS plus, which means he's just above league average there. But in the 2021 season, that was like his first true breakout, 12 home runs, 43 RBIs, and right around 93 games played, a 247 average, a 778 OPS, and a 108 OPS plus. So interesting. Really, really like the fact that the Mets managed to get this guy as well, who still has 3 years of control, if I'm not mistaken here, for Tyrone Taylor, who's going to come in again as a bench bat / fourth outfield option should the Mets keep him. And we know the Mets need as many outfield help as humanly possible, and you're getting Taylor, who certainly can help in that regard. I'm going to look up his defensive numbers right now, too, because I don't want to misspeak on him whatsoever. But here's your numbers there for Tyrone Taylor. Let me pull up Fangraphs as well as I'm throwing up the numbers together. Again, usually I have the numbers present to you guys. I do a lot of prep work, but nothing had me mentally or physically prepared for the Mets to do this type of trade today. I was just tweeting about Yamamoto, how I actually have an overwhelming sense of optimism on that front. That I'll explain more in tomorrow's live show. But in the meantime, right, not long after I tweeted that, we see from Ken Rosenthal, I believe was the first to break the news that the Mets are landing both these players. Let's see, Jam and Jet, thank you so much for the membership, my man. Love the name, too. Whether that's Jet Williams related or not, I appreciate you coming in here. Here we go with Wardy making an excuse for every trash signings, never fails. Yes, Justin, and we're going to go through this again, my friend, because even though I explain it as much as humanly possible, it still doesn't click through that head of yours. And I don't mean this as an insult, but if you're going to say it, I'm going to come back with it. For the fans that are going to criticize depth moves, when depth is the exact reason in part why the Mets have struggled so much in recent years, I don't know what else to tell you. You're never going to be happy unless it's groundbreaking, truly massive moves that happen this offseason. Even if the Mets land Yamamoto, I'm sure there are going to be fans out there that say, wow, way overpay, not worth it for a guy that's never pitched in the bigs. You're never going to win as a Mets fan, let alone a content creator that covers the club. I'm just breaking down the rationale behind the reasoning. You know, the Atlanta Braves, they make moves just like this, have done that plenty already this offseason. Salary dump moves to acquire depth pieces that can help their team right away if they do not flip them elsewhere for a better return. But no, we're going to criticize this move as the Mets gave up a lower level prospect that no one, for the most part, knows well about, is out for Tommy John surgery for 2024. But yes, such a bad move by David Stearns and the Mets. How dare they go out of their way to land a back-end rotation piece and fourth outfielder type for literally a bucket of baseballs. Shame on them. Truly shame on them. This is what I just cannot understand the rationale behind hating on depth pieces. I can understand it if, say, this was a blockbuster and the Mets acquired Corbin Burns, but they gave up Francisco Alvarez. They gave up, let's say, I'm trying to think here, and other top prospects, right? Controllable young talent, as good as Burns is. Do you guys want to see the Mets trade away top talents like that for a rental? Would you be happy giving away Alvarez, all these things? So if that type of trade happened, I can understand criticism. But if you're going to talk shit about giving away a bucket of baseballs for a back-end starter and an outfielder type, you know, that just sounds like a you problem. Because for me, I'm going to revel in this and understand that, yes, this is how you actually build clubs that have proper depth. Might be hard to comprehend for some of you. I'm fully aware of that. But now let's get back into some of these more comments, questions, and concerns, along with getting into Tyrone Taylor's numbers. I just want to make sure I didn't miss a donation. I don't believe I did. Thank you for the memberships as well, guys. And this was completely a dump by the Brewers here that don't want to deal with the salary. And the Mets saying, thank you very much. We have no problem taking on your salary. Speaking of Tyrone Taylor, he has been a plus defender each season in his young career. Last season, he was actually a plus 2.5 defensive rating per Fangraphs, and the year prior in 2022 was a plus 4.5 defensively. Now, the positions that you can check Taylor at are going to be specifically in right field, center field, and left. That is absolutely perfect. The Mets were looking for a fourth outfielder type that can play all those positions. Yes, of course, is it possible that they could still go after Michael A. Taylor? Sure, it's possible. I'd imagine if they did that, then they're probably going to flip Taylor elsewhere. Again, the only reason why I'm speculating that the Mets may flip flip one of these pieces is the depth moves that we saw with the Braves. You know, that type of mindset where, okay, we got guys because they were salary dumped here and they can definitely impact us at least positively to a degree for the upcoming season. But if we could flip them elsewhere, knowing that there's a better guy that we have in mind for this position, then we will certainly do that. Now, on the forefront face value, I'm evaluating this as the Mets keeping both Adrian Hauser and Tyrone Taylor, which I'd imagine would keep them out of the Michael A. Taylor sweepstakes going forward, but we still have yet to find out if that's going to be the case or not. This is just me speculating from everything that we know to this point. Shout out to my man Darren, great member, the best Mets fan from the UK you'll ever meet. Happy to have you in here, brother. Appreciate everyone else watching live and on replay. Really does mean a lot. And what I want to emphasize more about this move and why I like it so much is David Stearns got some of his guys here. That's what I like most. These are two guys that no one knows better outside of the Milwaukee Brewers organization than David Stearns himself. Stearns was a heavy focal point in the success Adrian Hauser has had so far in his career. Tyrone Taylor, that pick as well, he certainly had a play in. I'm actually going to look, when was Taylor drafted? Let's see here. 2012 June amateur draft. Okay, so he wasn't part of the initial draft because at that point, if I'm not mistaken, David Stearns was just starting his tenure with the Houston Astros there as assistant GM, but he dealt with Taylor every year in his career up until the past year while he was away from baseball as he was figuring out, okay, I'm going to go to the Mets, just figuring out when we're going to get that finalized, when my contract is up. But Tyrone Taylor, I'm also going to look at his splits here because I'm curious about them, if he's someone that favors better versus lefties over righties, things of that nature. And of course, guys, let me know your initial reactions to the breaking news that the Mets have acquired two pieces from the Milwaukee Brewers for a low-level prospect. Let's see here. Okay, when we look at this past season at least, pretty even numbers actually. Okay, against left-handed pitching, again, only 81 play appearances, 241 average, 728 OPS, and against right-handers, 230 average, 706 OPS. So there isn't a favoritism too much, at least that the numbers tell us for Taylor, that, oh, he boats best versus righties over lefties. I mean, he slightly is better against lefties, but nothing that I think we're going to see the Mets go crazy with a platoon of. They're just going to do it based on situational, either late defensive replacements in the outfield for Taylor, or, of course, off the bench in certain situations, assuming that he will be on the roster heading into next season. Thank you so much for the donation as well. Who are the Mets giving up? Low-level prospect that they acquired in the Eduardo Escobar trade last year, that being and Coleman Crowe, pitching prospect who will not be pitching at all in the 2024 season thanks to Tommy John surgery. Mike, I will try to. Again, we have north of 800 live concurrent viewers, so naturally I'm not going to get to everyone's comments. I apologize if I'm doing my best here. Professional, thank you so much for a donation. Says, so we basically turned Eduardo Escobar into a starting pitcher that's better than McGill, an outfielder that's better than DJ Stewart. Stearns playing chess, gentlemen. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is another thing. As much as we all like DJ Stewart, the Mets don't have an overwhelming sense of confidence in having DJ Stewart be a corner outfielder for them next season. We know David Stearns has a heavy emphasis on run prevention. That is what Tyrone Taylor will help provide. Also, again, he has some pop in his bat. Can give you 10 to 15 home runs a year. Not that it's much, but if you're going to have a fourth outfielder type that provides those numbers, it really is hard to complain. Now, of course, if Taylor is starting every single day in the corner outfield for the Mets next season, I will be the first to say that this is blasphemy. This should never be happening. But I feel very confident in saying that barring injuries, that will not be the case whatsoever for Taylor. And speaking of Taylor, let me throw up his numbers here because we've been talking about him plenty, and I've only been showing the highlights here of Hauser from the past year or so. So bear with me 1 second. Let's get those numbers in here as well. Not numbers, highlights rather. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to have some Taylor highlights rolling for you guys. Did I read the SNY tweet? No, I'll check it out right now. Hauser could be our new Trevor Williams. Exactly, yes. And the Mets, since losing Trevor Williams, have desperately been needing a swingman type like that. And Hauser, you know, just looking at the numbers right here, he makes a lot of sense as a swingman, especially if you do have a six-man rotation. God willing, you do land a Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Again, the guy, the most he's pitched in a season is 142 innings 2 years ago. Career, he's probably sitting around on average around 100 and so innings. Next season, he projects to pitch around 142, but I have a feeling he could very well be used as a six-man / swingman, and that makes a lot of sense for them. They said Cone is in the process of making a very serious offer to Yamamoto. We already know that. That's common sense, but I'll discuss that further in tomorrow night's live show. Was going to do a free agent frenzy show tonight, but probably going to push that now that this breaking news has happened, and I want this to marinate a little bit, and we're going to have a special guest on tomorrow's show too, so I'm going to hear his thoughts about this move as well on top of all you guys in the chat right here. It's pretty dang good for a fourth outfield. Exactly, Bill. This is what I mean. You can criticize moves all you want as Mets fans. I know a lot of fans just have their panties in a twist because the Mets haven't done any groundbreaking moves yet, but they literally just fill two areas of need by giving up absolutely nothing in the process. And might I add, they didn't just fill in two areas of need with bodies. They filled it in with two guys that can be productive for this team, certainly at the MLB level next season. Of course, these aren't the sexiest names. Of course, we're all going to be fed up until we find out where Yamamoto lands, regardless on if it's with the Mets or not. But let's also appreciate these lower moves, because I promise you, they're going to have such a bigger impact on the Mets season next year than you could ever fathom. These little moves make a big difference because injuries inevitably happen, inconsistencies inevitably happen, and the last thing we want is for this Mets team to start calling up guys from the AAA that haven't earned their keep, that say aren't young uprising talent, like a Mauricio, for example, like a Beatty, like an Alvarez, in which they play their way essentially to their call-ups one way or another. I understand the circumstances were a little different with Alvarez, with the Omar Narvaez injury, but you get my point. You don't want to be calling up young guns if you're rushing them, and you don't want to be calling up minor league talent if they're not those top prospects that you're hoping for. And they're just mainstay AAA players. They're going to be pretty much useless for you at the MLB level. By acquiring Adrian Hauser here now as your fifth, sixth, or swingman, you really have little to no complaints there with a career 4-ERA guy. That's what you're expecting out of the back end of your rotation swingman type. And then here also when Taylor has pop in his bat, is a plus defender, and plays every position, and is also 29. So he's not even 30 yet. So for those fans out there that hate the idea of, depth moves that are 35 plus, you don't have to have those worries here with someone like Tyrone Taylor. You just get a little piece for both situations that you're hoping for your rotation / bullpen, and also here for your corner outfield, or even, back up here for Brandon Nimmo. He can certainly help late in game if, say, the Mets have a nice lead, put him in there for Nimmo, either shift Nimmo to the corner, have him come out of the game, whatever Carlos Mendoza prefers to do. There's just upside here, and there's no downside. And let's talk hypotheticals. If the Mets went out of their way and traded both these guys for a better return, I wouldn't complain either. Again, these are guys that you can certainly live without, but when you have them, when you have added depth the way that the Mets just did here for absolutely nothing in return, it would be a silly thing to argue or really complain about this, unless, of course, you can find valid reasons to say, hey, we did this move, but in reality, it would have been smarter to say we did this through the free agent market. I can't counter that because that might be true. But what is also true is David Stearns' relationship with these players, understanding them better than anyone else outside the Milwaukee Brewers organization. If David Stearns is going to trade with the Brewers, I'm going to trust his philosophy, his thought process behind making these moves, probably more than any other GM that you could ask for, given his experience with said players. That's where the Mets also have an upper hand when evaluating a situation like this. Let's see. The Pete Crow Armstrong trade will haunt us. He needs to learn actually how to hit at the MLB level. I'm sure he'll get there. PCA, if he can grow into his body and show power, that'd be awesome. But as of now, he's nothing more than an elite defender for sure, but a slap-hitting outfielder, something the Mets certainly do not need for a team beyond the 2024 season. They want to not only build structure in their outfield, but hopefully, fingers crossed, hopefully land power. Even if that doesn't necessarily happen this offseason, one can only hope it happens an offseason from now, headlined by Juan Soto, available in the free agent market. But I digress, because we're not going down that rabbit hole right now. That's a ways away. John, thank you again for that donation. But more than anything, guys, when you see this move, I want to ask you, yes, I know the Mets checked in on Brandon Woodruff. I will either be coming out with a video on that early tomorrow, or we'll discuss that further in my live stream tomorrow. So stay tuned for that one. But I definitely want to know your biggest takeaways with these moves as I'm continuing to go through the numbers here. Again, if you're just first chiming in, I apologize for people watching on a replay and hate the repetitiveness, but I really want to reiterate the message here of what's going on. If the Mets, again, have Hauser in their rotation, you're looking at right around a 4-ERA pitcher. And as we get into Hauser's arsenal, he has the fastball that sits on average 93 miles per hour, can top, of course, higher than that. The slider, 82 miles per hour, curveball right around 80 miles per hour, changeup, 84 miles per hour. The advanced numbers for Hauser leave a bit to be desired, aside from a strong walk rate that's in his favor, a ground ball percentage, which is certainly in his favor, and an extension. Outside of that, he's not known for overwhelming stuff. He's not a strikeout pitcher by any means. He's a big ground ball pitcher type guy, and that's fine. He also, of course, has the sinker. The sinker is the fastball I was pretty much referring to. Or actually, no, I'm mistaken. He does have both the sinker and the fastball that he utilizes a good amount. So when looking at the numbers here from this past season in his 5-pitch mix, Hauser pitches that have favored him are the following: four-seam fastball, 227 expected batting, 227 opponent batting average, 198 expected batting average with a 340 slug. So surprisingly enough, even though he doesn't have an overwhelmingly fast fastball sitting around 93 on average, he does have a lot of success in doing so. Slider, you're looking at 258 batting average for opposing teams, 44 slug. So that one isn't as good, but not terrible either. The curveball, the changeup, the sinker is where we have some interesting numbers here. With the curveball, last season gave up right around a 269 average, a 538 slug. Don't love the slug there. So clearly the curveball, he's probably hunted one too many times, and that's where he's given up some of the long ball from. The changeup, a 294 average, a 471 slug, but not as heavy with the home runs allowed on that front. Yeah, actually, when I'm looking at the home run numbers, the most bombs he's given up last season was 5 from his sinker pitch, and he threw that pitch right around 876 times last season, and a 296 batting average for opposing batters and a 396 slug. So funny enough, even though the slug is the second best out of his arsenal here with the sinker, he has given up the most bombs with that sinker because that's the pitch that he throws far and away the most. I mean, his second most utilized pitch at four-seam fastball is at half of the sinker at 441. Then the slider last season, 308. The curveball, 158, and the changeup, 73. So he has a lot of pitches, and that's what I certainly like too. I like that he has a nice 5-pitch mix. Hopefully him and Germany Hefner can work out something here and kind of get that contact ability down on the sinker, because again, batters did pretty well against it. Even though the home run rate wasn't terrible whatsoever, when looking at the numbers as a whole, the slugging was down. The contact ability was certainly there with his top pitch. So that's something where I'm curious how much better can that get, or if we're basically seeing the best of Adrian Hauser already, whether he will be a 5-6 man guy in the rotation, a swing man, whatever it may be. Frank, thank you so much for the donation. I changed my mind about the trade, but it's just frustrating, all these Wilpon type moves. Trust me when I tell you, Justin, I hear you and I understand. I'm not someone that likes going through an off season where we're going to be in the new year before we know it, and the Mets have done nothing of true substance, nothing outside of depth moves. Of course it's frustrating. What, you think it's frustrating just as an average viewer? How do you think I feel? I have to talk about them every day. You know what I mean? And I'm grateful for that. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not enjoying the sweepstakes for Yamamoto drag out as long as they have. I'm not enjoying the fact that, of course, we're seeing plenty of names out there that no one has picked up yet. It's been a slow winter as a whole, in large part because of Ohtani and because of the likes of Yamamoto now. Trust me, I don't love this. But, of course, any move that the Mets make that is major league level, you're more than likely going to see me discuss. Even some guys with spring training invites, because you understand the rationale behind these decisions. There's a great chance that a good portion of the players I've discussed so far this offseason are not going to have a great impact on the Mets next season when looking at certain relievers. However, when we get into the Luis Severinas, the Adrian Hausers of the world, these are guys that, yes, you might not love their numbers on paper from this past season, but their potential and the impact that they're going to have as depth starters is important for this club that needs as much pitching as humanly possible. If they didn't, it would be a different discussion. If the Mets have their rotation and their bullpen all figured out, and we're like, why do we do this? I'd say, okay, we're going to flip these guys right away. This is going to be the Braves way. It's going to be the AA way. That would be my initial thought process, but that isn't the case. The Mets, again, are desperate to add as much in these areas as possible. David Stearns has so much work to do in such a short period of time. I think people are sleeping on the fact that David Stearns already this offseason has made 20 plus acquisitions or so, when none of them have been to a sexy name level. So when you look at what the Mets have done from the depth perspective, and you look at what's still available out there, how much do we really have to complain about as fans? Everyone the Mets want is still out there. When it comes to bullpen, everyone they want is still out there. When it comes to starters, it's Yamamoto, and that's pretty much it. I don't foresee the Mets going out of their way to spend big dollars on a Jordan Montgomery overpay. A Shota Imanaga is a possibility, but they don't want to do a big overpay for mid-rotation guys. They only want to be spending big bucks on guys that are going to clearly be frontline aces of their rotation, which I respect and understand that. So I think we also need to remember, guys, we need to settle our expectations, because even in the scenario where the Mets do land Yoshinobu Yamamoto, they're not going to be landing any other big sexy names in the free agent market outside of maybe a David Robertson reliever type, a Justin Turner for short-term DH / corner, hot corner. they're not going to be doing anything overwhelming. You know, the big question mark is, what do they do for an everyday outfielder? That's the big one. They got Tyrone Taylor, who's going to be their 4th outfielder and bench bat next season as of now, but they do not have a true everyday outfielder, especially a guy that has a plus bat, figured out for the corner yet. That is still something that they have to figure out. Of course, we kind of have this understanding the Mets are going to land a Justin Turner, a Gio Urshela, short-term stopgap option to help in the hot corner for Beatty Vientos, while also providing plus bat at the DH position if you are Justin Turner in particular. But outside these things, we know the Mets aren't landing Cody Bellinger. We know the Mets aren't landing Josh Hader. We know the Mets aren't going to land a bunch of these other names out there because, one, it's a top-heavy free agent market. We're aware of that. There aren't a lot of sexy names out there. And two, the Mets are just focusing more so on area of need than anything else, which is why they were more than willing to basically eat this salary dump here from the Brewers free of charge, saying, absolutely, we'll give you this prospect that isn't going to pitch for another year. Outside that, that's all we're doing. And the Brewers, Matt Arnold, they said, yes, let's make that happen. So very little complaints on my front when evaluating these things. With all these bargain bin shopping deals from Stearns, how much leash is Cohen going to let Stearns go here? Really feels like Wilpon 2.0. I promise you this is the farthest thing from Wilpon 2.0. Everyone is just buying into short-term bias. That's the only reason why people are acting or thinking in such a manner. Let the offseason play out. David Stearns is going to have a very long leash as well. Stearns was brought in specifically to help build the organization for multiple years on end. This is not to make them be World Series contenders right away for 2024. That was never the indication. So for any fans thinking that way, I don't know what you were thinking or what you were reading, but you weren't paying attention. The Mets will be heavily competitive for a playoff spot next season. They're going to build from there. But David Stearns has so much turmoil that he has to figure out in a one-off season time that's almost impossible to properly do. So give him credit where credit's due with all these depth moves, because these are the depth moves that we're going to look down late into the season and say, wow, I really appreciate the fact that David made these moves versus us calling up, double-A pitchers right away, which is what exactly the Mets did within the first month of the 2023 season. It was inexcusable. Truly inexcusable, the lack of depth that this Mets team had last season, that really since I started covering the club for that matter, versus what they're building now. Again, they might not have the sexiest team on paper. They're not going to be the best team on paper, but they're going to have protection in their respective positions, something that they have not had nearly to the degree in years past. We're going to calm down. We're tanking for the pick. No, we're not 1,200. Thank you for the donation, though. I'll gladly take that, my friend. Really appreciate it. Frank, appreciate the donation. Really appreciate everyone's dono so far as we're breaking down the latest in Mets land as they've acquired 2 pieces. One for the back end of their rotation to Adrian Hauser, who has a year left of control, the 30-year-old right-hander, and Tyrone Taylor, right-handed outfield bat, which can help provide the Mets some pop while also plus defense late in game as a 4th outfielder for them for the next couple years, should they keep him. Again, he's 29 years of age, has at least 3 years of control on his contract, if I'm not mistaken. Taylor, if I'm not mistaken, also had some big hits against the Mets in that damn series in Milwaukee to begin 2023. What a shit show that was, am I right? But anyways, these are the latest new moves that the Metropolitans have done. But before we go further in the show, and I appreciate everyone's comments, thank you all so much for being here. I have to let you all know about today's video sponsor, that being our great friends at BetUS. For those that don't know BetUS, BetUS is America's #1 sports book, and as you've already seen on the channel, we have been breaking down their latest odds for Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So if you love doing your normal betting, over, unders, parlays, spreads, everything in between for all your favorite sports, BetUS has you covered. But they also have the latest Yamamoto odds as to where he'll be taking his talents for 2024 and beyond. And look what they did. Initially having the Mets as favorites, they have now dropped this week them all the way to 4th in their ranking at plus 600. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're at all a betting man or woman and you're interested in these type of odds, I highly implore you to buy in on this now. Everyone is writing off the Mets in the mainstream media for the most part. It's LA or it's Dodgers, and it's really no in between. Everyone's just repeating the same nonsense over and over again. Even though nothing has negatively went against the Mets' way in their pursuit of Yamamoto, things have only gotten better and better to this point, we know reportedly. And the Mets have done such a great job working in the shadows, not having their meetings become public to this point until after they've happened. They're the only club in baseball to do this thus far when evaluating the Yamamoto sweepstakes. So if you're trying to buy in, especially now when you can go plus 600 for the Mets and Yamamoto, now is your time to do so. Make sure you check out BetUS today by clicking the link in the description. That way you get a 125% boost with your first deposit. So if you deposit, say $100, you get $225 to work with right away. It's that easy. And again, I know I'm getting getting in on the action for the Mets at plus 600. It would be silly not to. Even if they don't land him, that's just almost free money waiting for you right there. Even value there for the Yanks, meaning how much you bet is basically what you're going to get in return. Love that. Hopefully that doesn't happen where the Yanks don't land him. The Dodgers plus 150, I think, is honestly high for them. The Giants above the Mets is the most hilarious thing of all, what we know to this point. We know the Giants have money. We know they're desperate. But are they Mets desperate? Are they Steve Cohen desperate to add a rotation piece like Yamamoto with so much to lose? Should they not land him this offseason? I don't know. Boston at plus 1,400. I think they're being way too much of an underdog there. I think Boston very well could be a plus 900, which would make more sense. But hey, I'm not the one making these. All I am is just the one facilitating them to you. So if you guys enjoy these odds, also want to get in on unique Wardy parlays throughout the 2024 season that we'll be discussing both pre and post game in our shows, make sure to check out BetUS today and shout at them as always for being a great sponsor on the channel. But one more thing, if you guys had to put an odds up right now, let me just ask you guys separately from this trade. If you guys had to put odds up right now on the Mets' chances to land Yamamoto, would you put them at plus 600? I wouldn't. I'm going to be open. I wouldn't. You know, BetUS is a great sponsor on the channel. I appreciate them. Doesn't mean I have to agree with all the picks, because I certainly don't. I think that that is such an easy way to get in on the action right now. So to everyone in the north of 700 live viewers in the chat, people on replay, let me know, where would you have things here when evaluating Yamamoto? Would you be in favor of it being right around 600? Or do you think it's more, I don't know, plus 200, plus 300, plus 400, plus 1,000? I'm curious where you guys stand, especially for my fans in here that are involved in the betting space. Let's see. Do you think this sets up another Mets-Brewers trade? This just opened the door of Stearns-Brewers relationship? It definitely doesn't hurt. Let me put it that way. The Mets doing this trade helps their chances for future moves with the Brewers. Now, I know naturally you guys are going to be like, all right, let's get Devin Williams. Let's get Christian Yelich. Let's get Corbin Burns. I don't foresee that happening. Could we see another move between the two teams this offseason? Anything's possible, of course, but I think that's a little wishful thinking right now. Have you heard Sal ranting about not needing Yamamoto? No, nor do I care. I mean, if I'm being completely blunt, I don't listen. I don't care for most other talking heads in this New York space, because I take offense to it a lot of the time when people go out there. I'm not saying specifically Sal, but you know, there's a lot of baggage that comes with him from the public eye that people are aware of. When I try to consume content from fellow creators, I really am putting an emphasis on people that are like-minded, like me. One, not necessarily like-minded, like we can have contradictive opinions or, you know, controversial ones even, but I want people who are doing their homework. And unfortunately, especially New York radio today, they're doing everything but their homework. They're talking, they're being loud, they're being passionate, but they're not doing their homework. And because of that reason, I just, there's a lack of respect I have with a lot of these people, because it's all just for clicks. And don't get me wrong, I'm a content creator. I care about clicks as much as anybody. But you guys know that I'm also not the person that's going to be screaming my head off over the Mets acquiring two depth pieces, right? I'm not the person that's going to be saying that, oh, it's okay if we don't land Yamamoto, because no, there's a big deal if the Mets don't land Yamamoto, even if they can't control it. Their offseason goes directly in hand with Yamamoto, with potential other moves that they do. If they don't land Yamamoto, they're going to land nothing sexy this offseason more than likely. So, from a fan perspective, and understanding the potential of Yamamoto over a decade-long deal, I think you'd have to be foolish to suggest that it isn't imperative for the Mets to do all they can to land him. I'm not going to sit back and be a shill and say, oh, you know what? Of course he's going to the Yanks or the Dodgers. Like, yes, that may be true, and I can't be mad at the Mets for it, but it doesn't mean as a fan that I won't be bothered by the fact that we still didn't land him, and we were involved in these sweepstakes for so long and it didn't go in our favor. I'm going to tell you how it is, because that's important. Landing him is so important. The Mets have more to lose than any other club in baseball this offseason that's going out of their way to land Yamamoto services. You cannot sit here and tell me the Yanks are more important for Yamamoto, like to land him. They have Garrett Cole. They have a solid rotation. They just need another solid starter. It doesn't need to be Yamamoto type. They just want him for obvious reasons. The Dodgers, they don't need Yamamoto. They certainly don't need Yamamoto. They need another starter in that rotation, I agree, but it could be a mid-rotation piece. There is not the same desperation level. The Mets have Kodai Senga, Jose Quintana, and that's it. Luis Severino is your number 3 to begin the season right now. If that isn't desperation, I don't know what is. Hauser, thank you for the $5 donation. James, rather. Appreciate you, James. Hauser basically replaces the value and innings expected from Carrasco last year. Solid contributor the last few years in Milwaukee. Yes, he does, while also certainly having more upside than Carlos Carrasco really ever had during his Mets tenure. I mean, you can argue 2022 Carrasco first half was nasty, but down the stretch he had his struggles big time. 2023 Carrasco, we're not even going to talk about. His time in Queens is done. We know that. Let's see. Hey, we checked off our fourth outfielder for years. I like this. One less roster piece to worry about for a good while. Yes, no, I agree. And also, guys, I'm going to do things how I've done things on previous shows before. For people watching on replay, this is probably where I'm going to cut off the live show. So, again, for people watching the live stream right now, we're going to continue the live show probably north of an hour. But after we're done being live here, I'm going to cut things to right around the 35-minute mark for people on replay. That way it's at least a bit more digestible, because I know a lot of people just want to see fairly quicker reactions to the trade and the news, so I don't want to have this be a very long-winded thing for you guys if I don't make a short video about this trade after the fact either. I'm not entirely sure yet, but don't be surprised if this stream is cut off once we're officially done here for people on replay. So make sure to smash that like and subscribe button, people on replay. Let me know your biggest takeaway from the Mets landing these two pieces from the Brewers. David Stearns rekindling the relationship with said players for a lower level prospect that will not be pitching in the 2024 season.